Take two. So good morning. Welcome to Liberty Church. We believe that God has a design and a journey for every one of us to take, to follow Jesus. And as we follow him, to walk with him and to find freedom through him and in community with one another. And as we find freedom, to discover that we've got a purpose that he has specifically designed and equipped and empowered us to fulfill, so that we can live that out and make a difference in the world. So the whole following Jesus at the start of it, where all that comes from, the origin story of the whole idea of following Jesus happened when Jesus walked up to a professional fisherman and said, don't throw it over there. Cast your net over on that side instead. And he had this greatest catch of his whole career, the biggest payday ever, the huge lucrative catch. And right there in that moment, Jesus said, now follow me, and I will teach you how to catch people for the kingdom of God. And Peter, you probably know the story. He dropped his nets, he left everything, and he literally followed Jesus. And he became the origin story for the billions of people over the last 2,000 years who have all said yes to following Jesus. It's a beautiful story, but sometimes I think that we might miss the actual point or the primary principle of that story, because it's not about Jesus saying, I want you to quit your job. God may call you to quit your job and to go into some type of full-time missionary or ministry work. It has happened, but it's not the norm and it's not the point of the story. The point of that story is that Jesus walked up to this fisherman, and what he did was he wanted to expand Peter's vision. He wanted to help Peter to see himself in a whole new way, to see the world, to see what the main thing was, to get a new perspective of what significance was, to call him into a vision and into a mission and into a purpose beyond his profession. More likely than not, most often, Jesus will not call you to quit your job, but he does call you to follow him. And when he's inviting you to follow him, what he's doing is he's inviting you to see that he has a bigger life, a bigger vision, a bigger purpose for you than maybe you have imagined. When we decide to follow Jesus, we find that Jesus gives us a greater purpose. And I think this is especially important for all of us who live here in New York City. Because if you'll catch this, it will actually change the way you live in New York. Rather than thinking of faith as this thing I got to try to hold on to from Sunday to Sunday and I hope I don't slip, rather than thinking of God as just someone who's going to try to help you to survive the city, we'll wake up every day with a different perspective of who we are and who God is and why we're here. We'll begin to see that, whoa, God has orchestrated all of this. He has me here and now in this city, for this city, in my job, in my neighborhood, on purpose and for a purpose. And following Jesus, you'll find out that you can do more than just make it here. You can make a difference here. And let me ask you, if you're a follower of Jesus here today, don't you deep down really want to make a difference here in this city? But have you ever felt a little overwhelmed? Not just by the sheer size of the city, but all of the competing ideas and values about what is true and what is good and what is ultimate. Maybe you've ever felt like, I don't even know where to start. I mean, how do you share Jesus with people who don't think they need saving? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what it looks like to engage our city for real. What it looks like to engage our neighbors, to start the conversation and to stay in the conversation and to make the conversation matter. If you're here today and you would say, listen, I don't know if I'm a follower of Jesus, or maybe you would say, I know I'm not. There's a lot I need to consider before I would ever kind of make that step or that decision. I want you to know, first of all, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're watching. My hope for you today is that you will see, that you'll walk out seeing that, look, the questions that you are wrestling with, the pressures that you are feeling, the decisions that you have to make about what really matters, that all of those really belong within this conversation of Jesus. And my hope is that today, at the very least, you will have greater clarity and take another step toward God and see how close He has taken steps toward you. But before we get into any of that, let me say good morning and welcome. My name is David. Along with my wife, Carrie, we are so honored to be the lead pastors of Liberty Church. We are just so excited about what's been happening here in New York and in our churches in London. Very excited about that missions trip in Manzini. That is going to be life-changing. I won't say any more because Alex did such a phenomenal job about that, but definitely at least come to that interest meeting and check that out. That's going to be just a great time. I also just want to say this is an absolute aside, and we'll probably cut it in post-production. Just kidding. I have a hard, I don't know if you're like me, but I have a hard time going to church and like sitting in church. I have a hard time sitting still, and that's true kind of in any environment. And I have a hard time coming to church and not being somehow involved. And so like I found myself like I'm back there. I have to preach today, but I'm back there running the camera back and forth and zooming in and turning it and kind of thing like that. And I thought to myself, you know what? I know that I'm a little quirky, but there may be other people who feel the exact same way. And so I'm scanning to see who's like fidgeting, who's kind of like, hey, I love being here, but also I really don't love standing still. If that's you, and you would say, hey, I could get involved. I actually roped somebody into this already this morning. But if you would say, that's me too, and I'd love to just, sure, I'll help with the camera, I'll help with the live stream, whatever. Come see me after, because I know that feeling, and there are ways that you can just kind of get plugged in and make it just so much more of a place that you are feeling engaged with. So, just a thought, random thought that I had. So, anyway, if Peter fishing is the origin story of following Jesus, the book of Acts is the origin story of the Christian church. If you read the book of Acts, it tells this incredible, wild, unpredictable story of this Holy Spirit-led movement that began in a city and then moved and spread all across the Roman Empire from city to city, entering those cities and transforming lives and changing the culture. And it's really interesting, this book of Acts, to read. It's a very interesting read because it's the story of the origins of the church, but it's also very important, if you're a Christian, it's very important to know because it's also our origin story. Like, it's history, but it's our history. It's our heritage, the book of Acts. Liberty Church, we are in New York City, and we are for New York City. I said it before, but I believe you are here in this city on purpose and for a purpose. And so it's really important and really valuable to learn and to see how the early church, how they entered the cities that they went to, and how the Christians engaged with their culture. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to learn about that, and we're going to begin the story in Acts chapter 17, verse 6. Paul is in Athens. It says this: while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see the city full of idols. I'm going to tell you, I promise we're going to get into this, but one more thing. I got to tell you, this is one of, if not my absolute favorite stories in the Bible. And it's not just for what happens in it, but it's really personal for me. This story, it has shaped my calling, my worldview, my God view, probably more than anything else. It was this passage is what turned my heart towards New York City long before I ever lived here. It's this story that is really the driver behind all that we're doing to come alongside pastors in cities all around the world. It's such a powerful picture of how the message of Jesus holds up in any culture. And it's a really inspiring blueprint how one person, you, One person can make a real difference in any city. So we're going to unpack it, and what I want you to see as we go through this is I want you to see how Paul engaged the city. I want you to see what he saw, what he felt, and what he did. And I want you to see how the gospel meets this culture that's so much like ours, and how the gospel speaks directly to our intellect, to our hearts, and to our will. And we're going to see three things as we go through this. We're going to talk about how everyone believes something, how everyone longs for more to their story, and how everyone must do something with Jesus. Everyone believes in something. Everyone longs for more to their story. And everyone must do something with Jesus. All right, let's first set the scene. Paul is in Athens. The Roman Empire is the center, it's the known world. It's the center of the world at that time. And Athens is the cultural center of the Roman Empire. So Athens is the center of the center. Anything that is created, this is where all of the artists and the intellectuals, this is where all the finances, everything that mattered to the empire, whatever was created and celebrated in Athens, it spread across the rest of the world. Athens was New York City before New York City. Okay? And this missionary team that Paul usually travels with, they're doing work in another city. So Paul walks in, and he's in Athens all by himself. And so I'm picturing, tourist vibes. He's probably got a Hawaiian shirt over his tunic, and he's walking slow, looking at the idols, right? And the people are getting annoyed because he's walking so slow. You know how it goes. And it says that he's distressed. He's probably distressed because he sees these two lines in front of one of the idols that looks like a bull, and the one that's in front of the bull makes sense, but the ones that lined up in the back of the bull, it just distresses him like it distresses me every Sunday when I walk out of these doors. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Anyway, this word distressed is actually an important word. So Paul sees this city, and what he sees are idols everywhere. And he feels distressed. This word distressed is not disgust. It's actually a word. It's a layered word, a nuanced word that includes two ideas: the idea of anger and the idea of love mixed. This mixture of anger and love. It's what it's used in the Old Testament of how God felt when he saw his people worshiping idols. It's that feeling you get when someone you love is walking down a self-destructive path. Anyone know what I'm talking about? You're angry. Not at them. Sometimes we mistakenly put it on them, but it's not at them. It's at that thing that is drawing them away from you love them, you want better for them. If you are a parent in this room, you know this feeling of distress. And if you don't yet, wait till they become teenagers and you will know it all too well. Paul saw the idols and he felt what God felt. He felt distressed. He was angry, but he loved the people. And so here's what he did. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day after day, with those who happened to be there. And so Paul feels this distress when he sees what he sees, but he's not disgusted. He doesn't condemn them and just move on to another city. Instead, he's got a compassion for them, and he moves on in. He starts a conversation with them, a conversation that they had not been having. First in the synagogue, but more importantly, he goes into the marketplace. He goes toward people who will never go to church, and he starts the conversation. Now, it's important that we understand the word marketplace. Marketplace, we get the wrong idea. This is not Union Square, Farmers Market. This is not a mall or any kind of shopping center. The marketplace was the agora. The word in some translations actually says what it is. It's this location in Athens, the agora. This marketplace was the cultural engine of Athens, which was already the center of the center. In Athens, there was no television or newspapers or TikTok. So where do you get your news? You would have to go to the agora, and the heralds would tell you what's happening in the government and around the world. It was the media center of the city. The agora was the financial center of the city. This is where deals were being done. It was the stock market where business was being done. This was the art center of the city where creatives would come and they would create and they would perform and they would meet together. This was the intellectual center of the city where academics would teach and where philosophers would come to debate. The agora was where all of the life of the city was happening. And so Paul goes there, and he tells us that he reasoned with them. This is important. So that word reasoned, the Greek word is the same root from where we get the English word dialogue, meaning Paul showed up not preaching, not with a monologue, not saying, here's where I'm right and you're wrong, here's why I'm good and you're bad, here's what's true and everything you think is false. He could have monologued. Actually, he was called and equipped and trained as a public speaker, but that's not what he does. Instead, he goes into the marketplace to talk to people who won't come to church, and he starts a conversation. He starts a dialogue. And we actually know this word is actually nuanced. We actually know there's a whole form to this conversation that he engaged them with. He started by asking questions. So he's asking questions, and he's listening, and he's learning, and he's seeking intentionally to understand where they're coming from so that he can earn the right to speak, so that he can earn the right to tell them about Jesus in a way that they will understand, in a way that resonates with their worldview. All right, so what does this mean for us? There is no marketplace in our world. There's no, if what came to your mind was, oh, you mean the comments on Instagram? No, that's not it. There is no marketplace in our world where all of this is in one spot. It's all been siloed. The marketplace is everywhere that you work. It's everywhere that you go to school. It's everywhere that you do business and where you shop and where you interact with people. You come to what would be the synagogue for about 2 hours on a Sunday morning, but the rest of the week you go into the marketplace. This is really where your life is the most. Now, as a follower of Jesus, what do? It is not the time to go in monologuing. It's not the time to say, here, let me tell you about what I know. But also, as followers of Jesus, it's not the place to hide, to separate your faith from your work. The right thing as a follower of Jesus is we enter the marketplace and we start conversations. It's the right place to ask questions, to listen, to really listen, to learn, to seek to understand the people that we work with, the people that we learn with, the people that we are doing business with. We seek to start the conversation and to stay in the conversation. Those conversations may spread over days and weeks and months and years as we build those relationships until we earn that right to tell people about what we believe, to tell people and share the hope of Jesus, to make that conversation ultimately matter. And we learn to do it in a way that will resonate with people's hopes and their fears and their longing in a way that matters. In a city like Athens, in a city like New York City, the thing is, the first obstacle to the gospel is the intellect. And so Paul knows this, and we need to understand this, that he comes in reasoning first, intellectually, because here's the thing, everyone believes in something. Acts tells us what happens when Paul's there in the marketplace. It says a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him, and some asked, what's this babbler trying to say? They're being insulting. Others remarked, well, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So Athens had its idols. It also had its ideologies, its way of thinking. The Epicurean and the Stoic philosophers then were the intellectual elite. They were the classic secular New Yorker. They were the intellectual elite of the day. The Epicureans, they believed specifically that if there ever were gods and the gods were not paying attention anymore, they believed that God is not interested in you. God is not involved in your life. And so because of that, there's no coming day of judgment. There's no afterlife. There's no meaning to be found. And so they taught the best you can do in life is to avoid pain. Do what pleases you. Seek pleasure. Carve out your life on your own terms. Essentially, the Epicurean thought was to remove God from the story. The Stoics, on the other hand, believed that the divine was everywhere and in everything, but not as a personal being, rather as an abiding energy, an impersonal force in the universe that directed our fate. And so they taught, look, the world is chaotic and you have no control, so the best you can do is to detach emotionally, get control of yourself because you can't control what's outside. And so master yourself, master your morality, find peace within yourself. The Stoic line of thought was to put yourself at the center. Now, if any of these ideas sound familiar, it's because they're still around. We don't call them Epicureanism or Stoicism. Those who hold on to these beliefs would just call themselves irreligious. But here's the thing about religion. Belief is not restricted to religion. The truth is everyone believes something. Even the most secular of us believe something. It's inescapable. Christian or skeptic, we all have beliefs about some big things. And the thing is, all of our beliefs are unprovable. We all have beliefs about where we came from and what the meaning of life is and what's right and what's wrong and where it's all headed. But my skeptical friends, they can't prove that God isn't the source of all that, just like I can't prove that he is. It's a matter of faith, whether we call ourselves a person of faith or not. Everybody believes something. I commonly hear a couple things said to me. Typically, when they find out that I'm a pastor and people are trying to relate to me, they'll say something like, well, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you believe something, right? Which I just don't even know. On paper, that doesn't even make sense. Or we'll say, all belief systems, ultimately they lead to the same place, which of course is something that no belief system would ever admit to. But anyway, here's the thing. Not only do not all beliefs lead to the same place, they don't take us along the same journey. Because you see, whatever you believe will end up becoming what you believe in. And whatever you believe in will shape the quality and the direction of your life. Because whatever we believe in is what we're going to put our trust in. And whatever you put your trust in, anything that you put your trust in, anyone you put your trust in, you surrender some of your autonomy. A little bit. And little by little. And what you trust in will begin to shape your identity. It'll begin to become what you rely on and what consumes our thoughts and what dictates our schedule and what defines our priorities. And ultimately, it'll become the thing that we make sacrifices for. And if that isn't God, it'll be some other kind of idol that we've chosen to replace him with. Now, for New York, the most obvious, easy example is money. But, money is not always a matter of greed. Making idol of money is not always a matter of greed. Very often, and I would say most of the time in this city, the idol of money shows up in the form of survival because it's so stinking expensive here. I mean, rent, tuition, groceries, medical, it's all coming at us again and again. And sometimes we just tell ourselves, look, if I can just make enough, if I can just get enough, then I'll be safe. Just push a little harder and then I'll have peace. The thing about the idol of money is that it never delivers. It always keeps demanding more, raising the bar, and it will consume our thoughts, and it will drain our energy, and it will leave us anxious. And it's not just money. Every idol operates in the same way. It promises great things and asks very little of us at first. But ultimately, in the end, it demands everything from us and it delivers nothing in return. Well, every ideology that we could adopt, every school of thought that isn't the gospel about how to make life work, it all has the same two issues. One, it can't fix what's broken in the human heart. And two, it can't solve death. So Paul begins to talk about the gospel of Jesus. Because the gospel tells us that Jesus entered the world to do both of those things. To fix what's broken in the human heart and to solve death. When Paul talked about the good news of Jesus and the resurrection, he's saying something that no other philosophy or religion in Athens was offering. You know, for centuries, Greek philosophers talked about this rational principle behind the universe. They called it the logos. And the logos, it was the meaning of life. It's where we get the word logic and reason. The logos defined the moral absolutes and told us what reality is really real, what is actually true. And Greek philosophy taught that if you try hard enough, if you think hard enough and reason hard enough and you study hard enough, you will be able to discern a little bit of what that reality is. You might be able to get your mind around the logos if you try hard enough. And then Christianity came into the world. And you may recognize that word logos because the Gospel of John, this is how he starts his gospel. John 1:1, he said, "In the beginning was the logos. And the Logos was with God. And the Logos was God. And the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us." Christianity came into the world and told us, look, there is a Logos and there is a truth behind everything, but it's not a principle that you have to figure out. It's just a person that you get to know. And his name is Jesus. You can know the meaning of life by having a personal relationship with him. The gospel says Jesus stepped into our broken, unjust world, and he lived the life that we couldn't live. And he stood alongside the suffering, and he faced and endured and absorbed all of the injustice of evil. And when they killed him, it seemed like the powers of the world had won again. But then the resurrection happened, and it said otherwise. The resurrection said that evil and injustice and even death is being undone. And the fact that he did all of this for you means that God is not indifferent about you. He's not impersonal. In fact, it means you must be of really great value in his eyes. So when Paul says all of this, this is something they had never heard before. And so we read that then they took him and they brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this teaching is that you're presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." So Paul had met them at the intellectual level, and they wanted to know more. But here's the thing: Athens, like New York, is filled with ideas. It's got plenty of ideas. What they want to know specifically, they ask for, is what's the meaning of it? They want to know, look, it sounds intriguing, but can it satisfy my heart? So Paul goes there next. And this is the next point. Because everyone longs for more to their story. So Acts tells us that Luke stood up and he said, "People of Athens, I see that you are in every way very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I found even an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing that you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you." Paul he's not criticizing them, he's complimenting them here. He's saying, look, I can see that truth matters to you. But I can also tell by this idol of the unknown God that you also feel in your heart that there must be more. So let me tell you about this God that you're seeking, that you want to know, but you don't know yet. And Paul then goes on to tell them two things about God that he's speaking to their hearts here. He's saying these are two things your heart needs to know more than your mind. Number one is that God is bigger than you have considered. And number two is that he is more personal than you have ever imagined. He goes on and he says this. He says, "The God who made the world and everything in it, he's the Lord of heaven and earth, and he does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands, and he as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself, he's the source. He gives life and breath and everything else to everyone. Paul is saying God is so much bigger than you've allowed your heart to consider. I really think that this is the heart issue for most of our friends who won't consider God, who will say that God is irrelevant to them. Look, I would say that too. Of course, they're disinterested in God if their image of him is that he's just remote and indifferent and uninvolved, and that there's no justice coming and there's no restoration coming. Or if my whole concept of God was that it's not even a person, but it's an impersonal energy that doesn't know me and doesn't care, and there's no meaning and there's no answer for my suffering, then I would be completely disinterested too. It's not that our friends and our coworkers are closed-minded to God. I would argue that it's their concept of God is so small that their hearts haven't been moved by him. So Paul explains, look, God is so much bigger than you've considered. He's the creator of everything. He's the Lord of everything. He's uncontainable, and he's not dependent on anything of us. In fact, we're dependent on him. He's the source of life and breath and everything else. He goes on, he says, from one man he made the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. He's saying God's not absent. God is, and he has been, and he always has been active and interested and intentional. He goes on, he says, God did all this so that, this is so beautiful, God's done all of this so that people would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. God is so much bigger than you've considered, and he's so much more personal than you've ever imagined. He wants you to know him. He's not hiding. He's not even far away. He's so close. He's as close to anyone who will reach out for him. And Paul then goes on to say, look, I'm telling you this, but also this is written into your culture. God has put fingerprints in your culture all around you to see this for yourself. He's been trying to get your attention. The next verse, Paul says this. He says, for in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. You know, neither of those quotes are from the Bible. They're in the Bible now because Paul said it, that put him in the Bible. But neither of those are biblical quotes. They're both Greek poetry. Paul, he finds their poets and he's like, hey, here's the evidence. Here's the fingerprints. The one true God that you've not yet known, he knows you. And he has been leaving hints, breadcrumbs of himself in your own culture because he wants you so bad to see him. He wants you to find him. He wants you to know him. This is so true in our culture as well. I mean, think about our art and our movies and our music. I mean, how many of the greatest stories and movies that we watch are really resurrection stories? Where the hero it looks like he's finished, and then all of a sudden he rises again. How many of the epics are ultimately culminate in one person sacrificing themselves so that others can live? How many of our songs express the longing we feel to be seen, to be known, to belong? How many of our novels and our plays are really all based on their stories of redemption and justice? God is rarely ever named in any of these films or TV shows or books or songs. He's never given credit for these ideas, but his fingerprints are all over it. They're whispers of his heart to our hearts, whispers of the gospel calling to the longing that we feel. God has put all of them in our culture everywhere we look so that we might perhaps seek him and reach out to him and find him. This is the heart of the gospel. That God is bigger than you imagined, bigger than you considered. That he is more personal than you imagined. And when we get that, when our heart gets that, it then brings us to that place where we have to make a decision of the will. And this is the last part. Everyone must do something with Jesus. Paul concludes his time here as he's speaking in this room. He says, therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man that he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. Paul's telling them, listen, God has put a day on the calendar when everything broken will be set right. That his judgment is going to be done and going to look like justice. That judgment word is a scary word, but that justice word, isn't that what we all really want? When we know that our world does not operate fairly. The rich cut in line, the strong get away with abuse. The broken systems leave the vulnerable behind. Every day in our own city, we see people who should deserve better being overlooked. People who deserve to be held accountable, walking free. That's why God's judgment is not bad news at all. It means that one day the scales are going to finally be balanced. That God in his justice is going to heal what's been broken. He's going to lift up those who have been wronged, and he's going to hold the wrong accountable. You know, every idol, every ideology, it all promises something. It'll promise you freedom, it'll promise you progress, it'll promise you control, it'll promise you peace. But none of them meet our deepest need. None of them heal shame. None of them undo wrongs. None of them give back what you've lost to death. But at the cross, Jesus absorbed the full force of sin and injustice and death. And he drained its power and buried it so it has no claim over us. And in his resurrection, God proved that his suffering and death, it is not the last word. That only in Jesus do we find restoration? Do we find our bodies renewed, our loved ones returned, life made new, the whole world made whole again? The resurrection is God's proof that Jesus is God's Son. But it's also proof that Jesus is necessary. Because there'll come a day when we stand before God. And when we do, we will either stand with Jesus, who has already made us right with God by what he's done on the cross. Or we will stand on our own, in our own record, to face judgment. God doesn't want any of us to stand alone. And that's why he sent Jesus, so that we don't have to. The gospel tells us that anyone who will put their trust in Jesus, who will say yes to him as the Savior that we need, as the leader for our life, we will be saved from this judgment. We will be brought into a new life with God. And that's God's desire for you. That all people would reach out and find him. But each person has to make that decision of the will. God won't override your will. Each person has to make that choice and choose Jesus or reject Jesus. Everyone must do something with Jesus. So Acts tells us how the Athenians responded to his message. It says that when they heard about the resurrection of the dead, that was it. Some of them sneered. But others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. And then it says that some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, and also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. So, a few. This was not Pentecost. This wasn't, 3,000 people running to baptism. I can just imagine Peter calls up Paul right after this, like, oh, hey, how'd the service go? How many people, raised their hand and said yes to Jesus? Oh, it was 2 and some other people. It was just probably just the 2. He's like, oh, well, we had 3,000. Yeah, I know. It was just 2. But it's significant that Luke records the names of these 2. He first of all records Dionysius, who was a member of the Areopagus. That was the elite of the elite. That was the high council. Those were the wise of the wise. He was a cultural insider. And he also tells us about Damaris, who's a woman in a time and in a world where women were never listed and rarely ever named in anything. He tells us the gospel reached this culturally powerful as well as the culturally overlooked. Luke wants us to see how the gospel changes culture, that it crosses lines of influence and reaches the very top, and it crosses lines of exclusion. We know that Dionysius later became the bishop overseeing an expansive church in Athens, of all the church plants in Athens, and Damaris was a prominent leader in the church as well. That moment where Paul spoke, those seeds, those changed lives became seeds of the gospel that ultimately transformed a city and transformed a culture. So let me end with this. Just a couple what ifs. First, if you're a follower of Jesus here in this room, what if Jesus has you here in this city, in this time, for the sake of just a couple people? What if the conversations that you start in your workplace, in your classroom, in your building, what if those conversations might become just a seed of something that grows into something so much bigger than we can ever imagine and may never see? What would that take? Well, we see what Paul did. Paul was distressed by what he saw. He wasn't indifferent to people being far from God, but he also had that love for them. And because of that love for them, he engaged them in these conversations. And he stayed curious to understand. And he was clear about Jesus. What if you entered the marketplace tomorrow with this greater purpose in mind? What difference might you make? And then lastly, maybe you're here today and you're still figuring out faith. Well, here's my what if for you. What if all this that we've said about Jesus is true? And what if you were to make the decision today to let the hope of Jesus fill your heart, to let the love of God free you, to let the truth of God to shape you? What if today you were to take that leap of faith and say yes to Jesus? Say yes to the relationship with him that he wants you to have. What impact might that make in your life, in your family, in your future? And what maybe even greater purpose might be Jesus inviting you into? Let's pray. We're going to sing one more song today, but I just want to close and take a moment. If you're here today and you would say, listen, I have removed God from my story. I put myself at the center. And I need to get right with God today. And I'm ready to put my trust in Jesus and say yes to him. To invite him to be that Savior that I need. To be the leader of my life. And today I'm ready to make that step and to make that decision to get right with God and trust Jesus. If that's you, I want you to know it's just a prayer away from stepping into that relationship with him that saves us, that changes us, that brings us into freedom and purpose. So if you want to make that decision today and you would say, I want to get right with Jesus, I want to begin or start again my relationship with him, would you just slip up your hand so I can pray for you? Yes. I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm not going to ask you to come forward. Yes. Yes. I just want to know who I'm praying for today. Anybody else? Say, I want to get right with him today. Put your hands down. I want to pray. And as I pray, I want to invite you to pray along with me. And they're my words, but God is responding to your response to him. And if you're a follower of Jesus in this room today, would you also please pray with us so we don't have to pray alone? Jesus, thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for knowing me, for loving me. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for coming to earth, laying down your life, raising from the dead, that I could have a new life. I put my trust in you today. I say yes to you. I receive you as the Savior I need to save me from judgment, to work justice in my life, to help me to follow you. I will follow you. Please lead me into the freedom and the purpose and the significance you have for me. Thank you for your love for me. Help me to love you. Would you stand with me? We're going to sing one more song.